to what we saw at the beginning of or right at the renal pelvis there, we saw that transitional epithelium. Alright, so that's going to lead straight into the ureter. So once you see transitional epithelia, you know it's either the ureter or your bladder. Alright, so we have a single tube. You can see the transitional epithelium. So remember, it's a stratified epithelium with these large balloon-shaped cells at the top. Alright, so that's when that's when it's relaxed. As it stretches, the cells at the top are going to look a little more flattened or a little more squamous. You can see one here with a cell that looks a little bit more flattened, but they're not going to get as flat as your stratified squamous epithelium. Alright, so we have this single tube, and usually it has kind of a star-shaped lumen. So you see kind of a star shape here, these little parts projecting outwards. And you're going to have a little bit of a smooth muscle in the walls. Alright, so the main thing that will help you to tell the difference between the ureter and the bladder is that the ureter is going to be a single tube. The bladder is going to be too large for you to see the entire thing on one slide. So you're only going to see a piece of it. You're not going to see the entire thing on one slide. So again, you have your transitional epithelium. Alright, so you're not seeing the whole thing on the slide. And in the bladder, the wall is much thicker than you see in your ureter. And you're going to have a lot of smooth muscle present in the walls. So notice you have this very thick thick wall. It has about 3 layers of muscle that's surrounding the lumen. Alright, so you have a lot of smooth muscle, very thick wall, and you have your transitional epithelium. Alright, so that's going to be your bladder. So if it's a single tube, it's your ureter. If you're only seeing a piece of it and it has that transitional epithelium, you know that's your bladder. So again, at the top you see these large balloon-shaped cells that are going to become more squamous as the bladder stretches. Alright, so we move from the bladder. Oh, I had another slide of the. So again, you have your transitional epithelium, and notice you have this very thick wall, a lot of smooth muscle present in the wall. So once you see that, you know that's your bladder. Once you see the epithelium, you see the transitional epithelium, then we know that's your bladder. Alright, so notice these very large cells in the top layer of the epithelium. Alright, then from the bladder it goes into the urethra. So we look at the female urethra today, and when we get to the male system, we look at the male urethra. Alright, so your urethra, at the beginning, it's going to have a transitional epithelium similar to your bladder, but as you go further down, it's going to change from transitional to stratified squamous epithelium. Alright, another thing that you're looking for in the urethra is that it has these venous sinuses in the wall that are going to become filled with blood once there's stimulation. Alright, so if we look at our epithelia here, alright, so notice we have these very flat cells at the top. So that's our stratified squamous epithelium. Alright, we're not really seeing those large balloon-shaped cells like we saw in our bladder. Alright, and then back to the little more to show you the sinuses. All right, and then you have these large sinuses that are going to become filled with blood. All right, so it's a little bit similar to what happens in the male, where when you have stimulation, you have these sinuses that fill with blood, and you get an erection. So it's not to the extent that you see in the male, but it does. You do have a little bit of that happening. All right. So once you see these venous sinuses and you see your stratified squamous epithelium, then that's going to be your female urethra. And in the lumen, let me show you another slide. The lumen in the female urethra is usually, it has usually this typical U shape. Alright, so this is scanning view. So notice you have this kind of U-shaped lumen that you'll see, and that's usually characteristic of the urethra. So if you see that, well, not all our slides you're going to see that distinct U shape, but if you see that, you know that that's your urethra. So we have our stratified squamous epithelium here, and again you see these venous sinuses that tend to fill with blood as when there's stimulation. Another thing that you'll see is you'll see a little bit of muscle in the wall as well. Usually it's smooth muscle, but when you get to the outer portions of the urethra, there's a little bit of skeletal muscle where you have your external urethral sphincter, and that pretty much is what controls your micturition reflex. That's what is going to control your urination. So once you have relaxation of that muscle, then you have urination. So in this one, we're seeing a lot of smooth muscle, but in some slides you see skeletal muscle where we're getting close to the outer parts of the urethra. Alright, so again, this is a single tube. You see that U-shaped lumen. You see the transition, well, not in all the slides, but you might see the transition from transitional epithelia to stratified squamous, and you'll see these venous sinuses present. Alright, and in some of them, you'll see the transition from the stratified squamous non-keratinized to keratinized epithelium as you move towards the outside. Alright, so that's it for urinary.